This is Juanita Price. I am the host of Truths to Live By, and depending on which other broadcast that you're watching right now, I am also the host of Christian Counseling Today. Today, I want to talk with you just for a few moments about something that I think is critical, and it could even be life-changing for someone that is suffering with anxiety and maybe even depression. One of the things that I have found out of the many years that I have both been ministering and also counseling people is one of those major areas that actually continues to add weight and pressure and that brings sadness and triggers anxiety to a person's life is not just something that has happened, right? But also it's about what they think about and what they feel about what has happened. And this is where mindfulness is going to be a huge, gigantic helper to you. When you think about those and you've been through this yourself, I'm sure, that those times where you felt just the weight of something that has happened to your life just sitting on you. Sometimes it's sitting on your chest, it's sitting on your head, and sometimes because of how this incident or event in your life has affected you, if you really pay attention to even your physical body and start to try to focus on how this is impacting you physically, you can probably note that there are areas of tension going on throughout your body, from how you're maybe clenching your jaw or holding stress in this area, down to your neck and holding tension in your neck, your shoulders, your back, and so forth. And I often tell people this, is that when they are experiencing weighty negative emotions, it's a good idea to even begin to check some of your vital signs, like your blood pressure and things like that. And some people are astonished to find out that their blood pressure and so forth is through the roof. So you can see right away why it is important, right, to not only pay attention, but to practice what I'm about to talk about, which is mindfulness, because it is critical to you staying in a healthy zone. But it's also helpful to you so that you can sort of get in the driver's seat of determining in that moment what it is you're going to be focusing on, because your wellness is on the line. And many find it very surprising to learn that even though life happens, and life is always going to happen, that when in the right hands, or should I say, once a person actually awakens to the fact that they have more power and more control when it comes to their mind and their emotions than they actually ever knew, it is life-changing. And so one of the things that we've discovered is this, that life does happen, right? But it's how we feel about the things that have happened that determines how well we're going to do, how we're going to be feeling, and so forth, right? And how what has occurred is going to actually impact us even physically and mentally and emotionally, so that we can learn from this, that I can actually choose not only what I'm going to think about in terms of this event that has happened, but I can determine also when I'm going to think about it. Yes, you absolutely can hack in to a triggering event in your life, and even emotions and thoughts that are ruminating and that are all over the place, and you can stop it in your tracks if you can begin to practice even being mindful as a part of your daily meditational life, that when things do happen, you now have built yourself up and you've trained yourself to decide, yes, whether you're going to deal with this today or whether you're going to table it for another day, to where you now have gotten a bit of grounding to now deal with it, right? You can actually determine that moment with just learning how to be mindful. And mindfulness is simply this: it is the intentional training of your attention span. Sometimes I help individuals do this, I would say, as part of their training, right, to get greater control over their mental processes, meaning their thought processes, and then of course by default their emotional life, to just do something, take something that you do every single day routinely, and to where you do these things to such a routine ways that you don't even think about it. Have you ever walk to your bathroom? Of course you've walked to your bathroom and you went in there to intentionally brush your teeth, but the truth is that on your way to that bathroom you might have been paying attention to a phone in your hands, or not even, if you may not have even had anything in your hands at all, but you had things on your mind. And so you make your way into your bathroom, you turn on your water, you get your cup that you're going to rinse with, you pull open a cabinet and you get your toothbrush out, or wherever you keep it, and your toothpaste and things, and you're doing all of these things, but you're not mindful in that moment because you are running, on, sort of automatic, because you don't have to do much thinking about things sometimes that you do actually routinely. But what if I said that you would be training yourself to be mindful by now paying attention on certain things? So when you go into your bathroom, practice this sometimes, that all you focus everything, all of your attention on everything having to do with brushing your teeth. The walk in the bathroom, the cup, the water that you're going to use, the toothpaste and the toothbrush, where you turn the water on and you pay attention to how that water makes you feel. That when it hits your hands, how does it feel? Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it hot? But really paying attention, and even as you're rinsing something out and it's getting on you, that you're paying attention to all of those sensations, that you're being really focused on that, right? And then how about this? How about how your toothpaste smells, or your mouthwash that you use? And maybe you're looking in the mirror as you're doing this to make sure that you are getting those areas that you'd like, and maybe how your teeth are looking as you move along, and how the taste of the toothpaste and everything, but just being strictly mindful and focused. Perhaps another way to do this is to, instead of using your dominant hand, right, that you use the hand that is not dominant to actually brush the teeth, and then to pay attention to how that feels and so forth as you're doing it. And by dominant, by using your hand that is not dominant, if you're right-handed, then you would want to use your left hand. If you're left-handed, and using your right. And then practicing these kinds of things. You could also do things like standing up in place or something and paying attention to taking your foot, lifting it off the ground, putting it in front of the other, and then taking it from in front of the other, putting it behind, and then resting it on the floor side by side, and then paying focused attention on doing that little exercise, as well as whether or not you're shifting weight, whether you're finding that you have to keep your balance, always be safe, of course, but being very mindful when you're actually doing these things. I know it sounds silly, right? But it's not at all. But it's teaching you, or you're training yourself how to train your attention, right? And those things are very helpful. Now, let's go to the scriptures, which is powerful, because now we're going to take it a step further, which I love. And so in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6, it says some really powerful things. So let's add to that everything that I just said. But now we're going to work in these scriptures, because now the Philippians is also saying, okay, now that you've gotten to where you have trained yourself to be focused and meditational, here is what we now want you to do. This is what the scriptures are saying. I'm going to read it, and I'm reading from the King James Bible. Use any version that you are comfortable with, but it's Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 through 8, and it reads, "Be careful," and then some interpretation say, do not be anxious, right? And so the word careful in that passage means to have this distracting care of a thing. And so it says to do not be anxious, or to do not be care filled about anything, right? But it says, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. So it's saying pray about it, make your requests known, because that's really what the whole point of prayer in this passage is about. But it says this, with thanksgiving. Now, I have counseled people for many years, and I've counseled people with depression, counseling people with anxiety, with fears, and so forth. There is such power in thanksgiving that you would not believe. It definitely is a feature of mindfulness, because you, first of all, are focusing in on being thankful and the things that you need to be thankful, or you know that you have in your life to be thankful for in those moments, right in the midst of something else competing for your attention. So the thing that could be competing for your attention could be something that you fear, something that you are worried about, something that has triggered negative emotions because you may have been hurt, or offended, and so forth. But there's nothing more miraculous and powerful about hacking through all of that to say, but you know what, God, I have so much to be thankful for, and beginning to run down a list of things that you have to be thankful for. And let's say in that moment, the emotions are so high that you can hardly think, because there's nothing, that you can think about that can make you feel better about what is going on. Well, I have found that being positive this way is helpful in mindfulness practices, and that is this. Think about the very worst that could have happened. Look at whatever is going on, and think about the fact that it could have been even worse. And even that alone is helpful in shifting your focus into the thankfulness zone. It's powerful, but it takes practice, because again, the thing that if we've been allowing ourselves to sort of be taken away in the tide, in the storm, and the winds of negative experiences, this is not going to be easy. But guess what? It is going to be possible, because you are being intentional about it. You are telling your brain, or your brain now is telling you, no, now we're not going to think about this. We're actually going to sit this aside, and we're going to now focus on what? Focus on what you have decided is the best thing for you to focus on in that moment. And what we're shooting for in these mindfulness activities is we are shooting for training the brain to begin to do what is helpful to you in the moment and not hurtful. You can actually even learn how to postpone what it is you're going to focus on until you have had time to sort of relax and to come down from this, because you cannot even imagine the amount of tension that your body holds on to as it struggles to try to save itself, right, from the assaults that's going on in the mind and the emotional life. And so we tend to hold this tension physically. So we've got the tensed muscles, in the jaw, in the neck, in the shoulders, and dare I say, in those moments, grab a blood pressure monitor and begin to take your vitals. You'd probably be shocked to see the impact of what has happened, has taken on you as you have begun to think about it and to feel about it, and so forth. And so these tools can be in many cases even life-saving, but definitely life-changing, and definitely puts you more in the power seat, the driver's seat, where you have greater control and you have say-so over how a thing is going to impact you from moment to moment. Let's go on. And so as Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6 is telling us not to be anxious, not just saying, hey, you can turn on and turn off anxiety at will when thing happens, but it's actually giving you some pretty awesome instructions for how you actually get there. So it's saying, while it starts out saying, do not be anxious for anything or to be care-filled for no reason, it says, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. It just told you how to attack that anxiety, how to attack those negative emotions. It just gave you the remedy from shifting you from those negative emotions to a zone of peace, which is in the next scripture, that follows that. So it's telling you that the tools, right, to address, right, to reverse anxiety is prayer, which is simply you're going to be giving it to God. Supplication, you're asking God for something in that prayer, right? But thanksgiving, you're thanking God for that which has already taken place in your life, the things that you have to be thankful and grateful for, and the fact that this did not go any further than it has. In other words, it could have been worse. And God, I thank you for that as well, because it could have been, right? And then verse 7 tells you what happens as a result of praying, giving it to God, right? Of being thankful, giving it to God, and making your request to God. What is it, Lord, that I would like you to do for me, if you would be so gracious unto me? Then it says, and the peace of God is going to follow that. The peace of God is going to come after that. And it says that it surpasses all understanding. It means that something can be so bad that it's nothing short of a miracle to even explain how it is that you can have peace right now. Well, this is a miracle, and we were just given, right, the tools and the strategy for the miracle of peace when right now all hell is breaking loose and everything about it says that you shouldn't even have your right mind right now. But it says that this peace shall guard your hearts and your mind. Right? Yeah. It's going to guard your hearts and your minds through Jesus Christ. And then verse 8, I love it, because sometimes we need to, in fact, most times we need to then replace those thoughts and to replace that focus with something else, right? And that is, and it begins to list it. And it says here, it says, whatever things are true, right? True. And this is speaking of truth, not facts. That which is true. What is true is that when you love the Lord and you are called according to God's purposes, anything and everything, negative or positive, that takes place, God is going to work that thing out for your good in the end. Period. It says whatsoever things are honest. Sometimes we have trouble with that. Sometimes when life is happening, we shoot sometimes for worst case scenario. We begin to project into the future. Sometimes we haven't asked true and honest questions about a thing. What could I have done differently? How else could I think about this? And so forth. Just really getting honest, which is tough. And that requires a bit of inventory sometimes. And it says, and whatsoever things are just. Right? And we are praying to a God who is just, and he will ensure that justice shall be served. So whatever is just, where do we find that which is just? In the scriptures, because justice is what God says it is, right? And it says whatever things are pure, and there's another scripture that says unto the pure all things are pure. And we've got to open up, or we should open up, because it's good for us to allow purity to flow through us. It is very tempting, right, to be negative. It is tempting to even pronounce some things upon ourselves that we shouldn't in that moment. when we go through sometimes we are very unkind to ourselves, and sometimes the things that are flying out of our mouths are not a good idea, and it's actually making matters worse for us mentally, physically, and emotionally. And of course, when we are out of alignment with purity and with God's will for our lives, even in that moment, we have a tendency to follow that through our decision making. Okay. And it says, whatever things are lovely, right? There's the positive, inviting in that which is lovely and beautiful. Sometimes the things that we experience in life, they begin to change us, and they create a bit of cynicism and negativity, right? But it says, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of a good report, find the good in everything, a good outcome, a good hope for your future, good decision making. It says, if there be any virtue, sometimes you will have a floodgate of folks that just come alongside you and just help you complain. They may co-sign, the forecasting and the fortune telling of something worse, and that's not good for any of us. It's not going to shift us, into the hope zone when it comes to the future, and so if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. The scriptures are powerful, and they are a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And I sure hope that the things that I've shared with you give you hope today, and that you have come to understand that just because you're feeling a certain way, you're thinking a certain way, you're battling with something, that you are helpless, and that all there is for you to do is just to kind of lay there and let it happen until it either passes by and is over and behind you, while it's doing damage along the way, or even worse. But that that no, there are some things that I can do, that I have just learned in this broadcast today, to literally shift my mood and to shift how I see this thing and what I think about it, and also what I project for my future. And once we get all those things aligned, my goodness, all there is to do is to wait on God, right? To begin to take over and to go to work, working out anything that you've ever experienced in your life and shall experience out for your good. So you be encouraged and get to work practicing those mindfulness exercises and reading these scriptures so that you can obtain greater emotional management, right? You can begin to develop and become strong and develop and build a powerful mind and have greater control even over what it is that you decide that is best for you to think in that moment. And remember what I said, just because it's happening now does not mean that you have got to think about it now. So the Lord bless you and keep you, and may this broadcast be helpful to you. Please share it, like it. Listen, there's a script, and it just evaded my mind just now, but I know what it is. Pay it forward. Pay it forward. Share. Don't keep it to yourself. Share with someone else so that you can be of help to someone else. The Lord bless you and keep you, and I pray that you would keep listening.